He was a decorated Army veteran, a man who'd served his country with honor, courage, and quiet strength. After 20 years overseas, Marcus finally came home, ready to start fresh in a peaceful Texas neighborhood. But peace wasn't waiting for him. Instead, he met Karen, the HOA president who believed rules were more important than respect. And from the moment she saw the flag flying in his yard, she made it personal. What started as petty fines soon turned into a battle for his home. But when she went too far, karma stepped in. Before we dive in, make sure you hit like and subscribe because stories like this deserve to be heard. Marcus nods politely. He's dealt with tougher people in war zones. But something about her tone, the quiet ownership in her voice, feels off. A flag flutters on his porch. The same flag he fought for. Karen's gaze lingers on it, cold, judging. The music tightens. A narrator's voice cuts in. Marcus thought he was coming home to peace. But the real battle was waiting right in his own front yard. Before we dive in, make sure you hit like and subscribe because stories like this deserve to be heard. Marcus Thompson had been home for exactly 6 days when the first letter arrived. It came in a white envelope, neatly folded, with the HOA logo printed across the top like a warning. Violation notice. Marcus smiled at first. He figured it was a mistake, maybe a welcome packet that got mislabeled. He'd just finished mowing the lawn, the edges were clean, the flag was new, and the porch light was working fine. But as he read the letter, that smile faded. It said his grass was non-compliant. That it was 2 inches too high. He looked out at his yard, green, neat, better than most of his neighbors. And for a moment, he thought maybe this was just a misunderstanding. He decided to handle it the way he'd handled everything else in life, calmly, directly, and with respect. The next morning, he walked to the HOA office, letter in hand. The small building sat near the neighborhood's entrance, clean brick walls, manicured hedges, and a flagpole without a flag. Inside, behind the counter, was Karen Wilkins. She looked up from her computer, eyes sharp behind silver glasses. Her smile was polite, but cold. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice clipped and measured. Marcus nodded. "Ma'am, I got this notice yesterday about my lawn. I think it might be a mistake." Karen took the paper, glanced at it, then at him. "No mistake. We have lawn standards here. You're already in violation." He blinked. "I just mowed it." "Not to code," she said flatly. "And your truck, it's not supposed to be parked in the driveway. HOA policy prohibits commercial vehicles." Marcus frowned. "That's my personal truck. It has military decals," she replied. "That qualifies as commercial signage." Marcus felt something twist in his chest, disbelief, then anger. But he kept his tone calm. "Ma'am, I'm a veteran. Those aren't ads. That's my unit." Karen crossed her arms. "Rules are rules." And that was the moment Marcus realized this wasn't about the lawn. It wasn't about the truck. It was about him. Over the next few weeks, more letters arrived. One said his mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Another claimed his porch light was too bright. Then came fines, $75 here, $150 there, each one signed by Karen herself. He tried to reason with her, to appeal the violations at HOA meetings. But every time he spoke, she cut him off. "You're out of order, Mr. Thompson. You should have read the handbook. Maybe this neighborhood isn't the right fit for you." The other board members stayed silent. Some looked uncomfortable, others just avoided eye contact. It wasn't until a neighbor named Linda stopped by one afternoon that Marcus finally heard the truth. She stood on his porch, nervously holding a pie. "I just wanted to say," she whispered, "Karen's been like this before. She doesn't like people she can't control." Marcus nodded slowly. He didn't need her to finish the sentence. Still, he refused to be intimidated. He paid what he could, mowed twice a week, and kept everything spotless. But no matter what he did, another letter came. Then one morning, something changed. He walked outside to find a bright orange notice taped to his door. Final warning, property in violation. Fines totaling $2,870. His stomach dropped. Nearly $3,000 for grass, lights, and paint. He called the HOA office immediately, but Karen didn't answer. He left 3 messages. No response. Days later, he received a certified letter, this one with a courthouse seal. It wasn't another violation. It was a foreclosure notice. The HOA was attempting to seize his property to collect unpaid fines. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, letter trembling in his hands. He'd spent his whole life fighting for other people's homes, other people's rights, and now his own was being taken from him. He could hear the words echo in his head. Maybe this neighborhood isn't the right fit for you. It wasn't just about power. It wasn't just about rules. This was personal. And as Marcus stared out the window at his small, quiet street, the same one he'd dreamed of during long nights overseas, something inside him hardened. They wanted him to give up. They wanted him to walk away. But Marcus had never walked away from a fight that mattered. And this time, he wasn't fighting for a mission. He was fighting for home. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by letters, each one stamped with the same 3 letters that now felt like a curse, HOA. The clock ticked softly in the background, each second heavier than the last. He thought about the years he'd spent overseas. The missions. The brothers he'd lost. How every night, when things got dark, he told himself that someday, he'd come home, and it would all be worth it. And now, here he was, fighting another battle. Only this time, the enemy wasn't across the ocean. It was right next door. The next morning, Marcus went to the county office to confirm the foreclosure notice. The clerk, a young man in a blue shirt, looked confused as he typed. "Yeah," he said finally. "The HOA filed a lien against your property. They're claiming you owe almost $3,000 in unpaid fines." Marcus exhaled slowly. "That can't be legal. I paid most of them." The clerk shrugged. "If they filed it, they think they can win it. You'll need a lawyer." Marcus nodded, thanked him, and left. But hiring a lawyer wasn't easy. He was retired, living off his pension. Every dollar mattered. Still, he started documenting everything. He printed every email. Saved every text. Took photos of his lawn, truck, even his porch lights, timestamped and dated. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Meanwhile, Karen kept turning the screws. New violations appeared out of nowhere. Fence needs repainting. Unapproved patio chair. Unauthorized dog breed. That one made him laugh out loud. His dog, Ranger, was a 10-year-old Labrador. But the laughter didn't last. Because every letter came with another fine. And every fine brought him one step closer to losing everything. The neighbors started noticing too. Some waved and smiled less often. Others whispered when he walked by. Karen had a way of turning the community against you, quiet gossip at HOA meetings, subtle digs in the newsletter. Certain homeowners not following community standards. We're all proud of our veterans, but rules are rules. It wasn't just cruel. It was calculated. Then, one afternoon, Marcus came home to find a man taking photos of his house. He stepped out onto the porch. "Can I help you?" The man lowered his camera. "I'm from the HOA's contractor board. Documenting violations." "What violations?" Marcus asked. The man hesitated. "You'll have to ask the president." Marcus took a step closer. "You tell her I said this, stop harassing me. I've had enough." The man nodded nervously and left. But it was too late. Karen already had her next move planned. That weekend, Marcus received a letter inviting him to a special board meeting. The tone was formal, but the intent was clear: They were going to make an example out of him. When he arrived, the small conference room was already full. Karen sat at the head of the table, papers neatly stacked, a smug look on her face. 2 board members flanked her, silent. "Mr. Thompson," she began, "we've reviewed your ongoing violations. Despite multiple warnings, you failed to comply with HOA standards." Marcus stayed calm. "Ma'am, I've done everything you've asked. There's nothing out of compliance." Karen smirked. "Our records disagree. You've left us with no choice but to proceed with foreclosure. You'll need to vacate within 60 days. The room fell silent. Marcus leaned forward. "You can't take my home over made-up fines." "We can," Karen replied coldly. "It's in the bylaws. You signed them when you moved in." Marcus looked around the room, at the faces of his neighbors, the people who'd waved at him just weeks ago. Not one of them spoke. He stood up slowly, took a deep breath, and said quietly, "You're making a mistake." Karen's smile didn't waver. "We'll see." He walked out without another word. That night, as rain hit the windows, Marcus sat at his desk, scrolling through pages of HOA laws and state housing codes. And that's when he found something, a small paragraph buried deep in the legal text. It said HOAs in his state could not foreclose unless the fines were legitimate and properly documented, with receipts, photographs, and board approval. He looked back at Karen's letters. Half of them didn't have signatures. None of them had photographic evidence. She hadn't followed protocol. He realized then, this wasn't just harassment. It was fraud. The next morning, Marcus called a friend, an old Army buddy named Cole who'd gone into law after retiring. Cole listened quietly as Marcus explained everything. When he finished, there was a long pause on the line. Then Cole said, "Marcus, she messed with the wrong soldier." Together, they started building a case, filing public records requests, gathering neighbor testimonies, and compiling every shred of evidence. It took weeks. But slowly, piece by piece, the truth began to surface. And while Karen thought she was tightening her grip, Marcus was already lighting the fuse that would blow it all wide open. The HOA didn't know it yet. But the war they started over a lawn was about to expose something much, much bigger. Weeks turned into months. The battle between Marcus and the HOA had gone quiet, at least on the surface. But underneath, something was shifting. Karen thought she'd won. She'd stopped sending letters. The board had gone silent. Neighbors assumed Marcus was finally giving up. But he wasn't giving up. He was preparing. Cole, his lawyer friend, had started digging deeper. They pulled HOA financial statements, meeting minutes, payment records. And what they found didn't make sense. Thousands of dollars in maintenance fees that had never been approved. Payments to contractors that didn't exist. And most of the checks? They'd all been signed by the same person. Karen Wilkins. Cole leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised. "She's been stealing from the HOA," he said. "And she used your case to cover it up." Marcus frowned. "Cover it up how?" "By creating fake fines. The money you paid went straight into her own account." Marcus sat there in silence, anger and disbelief fighting for space in his chest. He had suspected pettiness. But corruption? That was a whole different war. Over the next few days, Cole compiled everything, a 200-page report complete with documents, bank statements, and screenshots. They sent it to the county attorney and copied every HOA board member. Marcus didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, 3 black SUVs rolled into the neighborhood early one morning. Agents stepped out, badges flashing, papers in hand. Marcus watched from his window as they walked straight to Karen's door. The whole neighborhood stopped. Curtains moved. Cars slowed. Everyone watched as Karen opened her door, trying to smile, trying to act calm, until one of the agents handed her a folder. Her face went pale. She tried to talk, to argue, to deny it, but within minutes, they were walking her out. The same woman who had once lectured Marcus about rules was now being read her rights. She was charged with embezzlement, mail fraud, and misuse of HOA funds. The news spread fast. That afternoon, local reporters were parked outside the subdivision gates. Neighbors whispered in driveways. And for the first time in months, Marcus heard his name spoken, but this time with respect, not pity. One of the board members, an older man named Richard, came to his house later that evening. "Marcus," he said quietly, "we're so sorry. We didn't know what she was doing." Marcus nodded. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. Richard hesitated, then added, "She told us you were aggressive. That you threatened her. None of it was true, was it?" Marcus gave a small smile. "No, sir. I just wanted to live in peace." Richard nodded slowly. "Well, you earned it." For the first time in months, Marcus felt his chest loosen, the pressure, the anger, the helplessness, it all started to fade. But the story didn't end there. Because when investigators went through Karen's files, they discovered something shocking. Marcus wasn't her only victim. She'd targeted 5 other homeowners, all of them either elderly, single, or people of color. She fined them until they gave up and sold their homes, then quietly resold the properties at a profit. It was an entire scheme, one she'd been running for years. Marcus's case just happened to be the one that exposed her. The county froze her assets. The HOA voted to dissolve the current board. And within weeks, Marcus received a letter, but this time, it wasn't from the HOA. It was from the county housing department. They thanked him for his cooperation. And enclosed was a full refund for every fine he'd ever paid. Attached was a short note. "Because of your integrity and patience, justice was served." Marcus folded the letter carefully and set it on the table. Then he walked outside. The air was quiet. Still. He looked over at Karen's house, the blinds drawn, the lawn overgrown. For the first time, it wasn't perfect. But it was honest. He raised the flagpole in his yard, clipped on the stars and stripes, and watched as it caught the wind. The same flag Karen once tried to take down. Now flying higher than ever. The neighborhood was silent, but Marcus didn't need applause. Because he knew something they didn't. Sometimes, karma doesn't come with thunder or fire. It comes quietly. Through paperwork. Through patience. Through truth. And when it finally arrives, it doesn't miss. A month passed. The neighborhood was different now. Quieter. The same people who once avoided Marcus now waved when he passed. They stopped by with cookies, with small talk, with awkward apologies that he accepted with grace. Karen's name wasn't spoken much anymore. Her house sat empty, the once perfect lawn now wild and uneven. The HOA had voted her out completely. A new board was formed, made up of actual neighbors, people who wanted peace, not power. They offered Marcus a seat on the board. He smiled. "No, thank you," he said gently. "I think I've had enough battles for one lifetime." Instead, he focused on rebuilding his quiet routine. Mornings with coffee on the porch. Evenings walking Ranger through the cul-de-sac. Life, finally, was simple again. One evening, as the sun began to set, Marcus heard a knock on his door. It was Linda, the same neighbor who'd warned him months earlier. She stood there holding an envelope. "This came for you," she said. "From the HOA." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" She smiled. "Not this time." He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, written by the new HOA president. "Mr. Thompson," it read, "on behalf of the community, we want to thank you for your patience, courage, and example. You reminded us that integrity is stronger than intimidation. The board has voted unanimously to clear your record and formally recognize your property as a historic veterans' home." Marcus blinked, surprised, then humbled. At the bottom, dozens of signatures from his neighbors filled the page. He looked up at Linda, who smiled softly. You changed things here, Marcus. For all of us. He didn't say much. He just nodded, that quiet strength in his eyes again, the same look he had in uniform, the same one he carried home. That weekend, the neighborhood came together for a small gathering, the first community event in years. Kids played in the street. Someone grilled burgers. Flags waved gently from porches. And when Marcus arrived, people clapped. Not because of what he'd lost, but because of what he'd stood for. He shook hands, shared smiles, and felt something he hadn't in a long time. Belonging. Later that evening, as the crowd faded and the sky turned gold, Marcus walked back to his porch. He looked at his flag, the same one that had started it all. It swayed slowly in the wind, colors glowing in the sunset. He thought about everything that had happened. The letters. The threats. The silence. The moment when he almost gave up. And then, the moment when truth finally spoke louder than power. He exhaled, long and steady. Ranger nudged his leg, tail wagging, as if to say, we made it. Marcus knelt down, patted his dog, and smiled. Yeah, buddy, he whispered. We made it. He didn't hold grudges. Didn't celebrate Karen's downfall. That wasn't who he was. Because soldiers know something most people don't, that real victory isn't about defeating someone. It's about standing firm when everything tries to push you down. As the last light of day faded, he stood up, straightened the small U.S. flag on his porch, and saluted. Not out of pride. Out of gratitude. Gratitude that, after all the noise, after all the chaos, peace had finally found its way home. A soft breeze passed through the street, rustling the trees, carrying the faint sound of kids laughing somewhere in the distance. And in that moment, Marcus realized something simple. Karma hadn't come for Karen just to punish her. It had come to restore balance. To remind everyone, even in the quiet suburbs of Texas, that you can't take what doesn't belong to you. Not respect. Not peace. And definitely not someone's home. He turned to go inside, the porch light glowing warm behind him. Tomorrow would be another quiet day, coffee, the paper, maybe a drive into town. A normal life. The kind he'd fought for. And as the door closed softly behind him, the camera of the story, if there were one, would linger on that flag. Still standing. Still waving. Still home. Because some battles aren't fought overseas. Some are fought right where you live. With patience, truth, and a heart that refuses to surrender. And in those battles, karma always finds its way.